not letting me pause the recording stop.
Okay. Oh, which page? Okay, just a second. Let me find it in the English. Although I don't have the page numbers are different because I don't have the English book. I can take a picture of the page and show it to you, but unfortunately my page numbers are not going to be the book page numbers. Let's see. Okay, okay. Right. I'll put it in the WhatsApp group as far as where this is going to start. So we'll start in there. Does that answer your question, Laura? It's as for the arising of the secondary afflictions and the root afflictions.
Last tani ngai tsoko zi jaro. Tani tanga tso kazakeni ketani jagar ketanda lopo oma pata tso nyomo chesa karamba shini tanti kablo shede at lopo yini ga musek zanyo chesa zanyo go nyenyo chesa zya ri ni shini tanga tso anya zanyo go nyenyo chesa tala manro de yore.
So we have gone through and we've looked at sort of different of the great Indian masters, how the different how the afflictions, the way of arising of the primary and secondary afflictions, and currently what we're looking at really is Vasubandhu. We're going to look at the way that Vasubandhu describes the arising of the primary and secondary afflictions.
Last watani katsang zanyo go nyenyo ma chesa she on the docha ka katse ke grezi ti ngotsa me patang go patang serna tang gyatang gyapa nam ke grez to so te she tsawa chini chapa yang ke grezi ni ta tani chi she grezi chapa to maru pa ke grezi ya tan docha ni ke grezi ni she sa ni o te dile peta.
Oh, welcome. And so when we talk about the secondary afflictions arising from the root afflictions, we can talk about from attachment comes shamelessness, excitation, avarice, pretense, and arrogance. And then from concealment, there's some disagreement. We can say that concealment arises from attachment. Others say it arises from, the book here says delusion, but we can just say ignorance maybe.
Chapa zedea Canada chilongonza chego resite man chesa gun chapa zedea ta soso gyond ngepsam chia ta kati na nga so chichongura soso non chi shor sona ramsam te mil ha ko machuni tama biya samlo chilegra on chapa zedea tndi shengdo gyong gebya ta yang gyon rezede te rewa yin.
So when we talk about the Tibetan word is chapa, which is just translated in the text as concealment, and what we're talking about when we say concealment is that it's essentially hiding your fault, right? So it's hiding any kind of negative quality or fault within you from other people. So for example, if you make a mistake, this tendency to immediately try to hide it. So when we talk about concealment here, what we're talking about really is hiding one's faults from other people. This sort of negative tendency to do that.
Tanachu na la nyablen na ngamaina shik chembo yore zete sang ta chapa ta sona me kya chapa zina sosul domba chmombo chikia yore te so katse nipa kusona nyama chonga na nipa kusona sugyon yin katel nge tndi non chi shor son zina shego ndo te na ya te mashena chapa ze ya te yung yena ya te sang la len de mundu.
So tentang di
sojong le tanda ton li che che ya te yo mari ya she ya te yo mari ngende ni ba shor son zini ya she mari da dombi ta chi shere kaze kuyo na zini chi she ma tong si yo mari.
And so particularly when we talk about monastics, what we're talking about in terms of monastics is breaking their vows. And so in terms of breaking their vows, the monastics do this purification twice a month called sojong, where they're supposed to confess and purify their vows. And so in that situation, for them, if you don't confess and purify your vows, that would be concealment.
Mari ngoma desang mombo yore ngoma ko subjon che goya te tini ka chama so so kyong ka ne habdo nyama chonga na kyong de ndri shor son ze ya shege yore desang ta chamni che shege yo mari.
Okay, so before they were very strict about this. They would get together and do this sojong ritual where they would confess all of their transgressions or their vows. These days, maybe things have gotten a little more lax, and so there is more concealment these days because people are not confessing their vows as regularly as they used to.
Te tan kin so na le so so go non tri shor na non tri tang len che to ate ya po chi ta non tri ma sa wa che na de cha chi kin so na le ce ge yora tan de su tin ri chi la shin cham sem ze ya te yo mom ba cha to ja re.
So really, just at root, it's just this idea that if we make a mistake or any kind of fault, that we should really just be open about it and immediately be open about it and not try to hide it. That's the main thing, not to hide our mistakes or our faults.
Ani ta ni pa ta chan yo mo na mang do cha ka che sar ta she cha is jini ta maru pa ga ka che ke re ze na maru pa ga mu pa ta yo mo chan ji ni ta chel me pa ni ni yo mo ba sam ki wa she ndu.
And so moving on, of course, now in the text here we have from ignorance comes dullness, afflictive sleep, and non-embarrassment. So this idea that from Marikpa, we have this idea of ignorance, and these secondary afflictions arise of dullness, afflictive sleep, and non-embarrassment.
Ani Marikpa tu mu pa ze dia te mu pa ze ate nyo mo ba tsa ge yore ta nyo mo ban ji yin sa re o ma to nga so kha tu na bi ja gen de le chi lekan rawo che na na kati na sem de man thum ni ma na thup thum de chi ni yang khu ma im ba ti ngel ma sem shu mom ban de chi na thup thum rawo chi le ndo o mar mom dan dar muk pa ze de ate ten so bo ma sem thob yon ta ni ma khu ngel chi le ndo o tin de ni ma pu ke le sem nyop to cha ni yang khu me ani ma na thup thum sa lo de chi ta ma to tan ri ta ma je mar pi ri cha ma tan ri yin sa re maru pa ze to meshi pi cha ni ra ma to ko khatik da cha ma.
So, where it says, from ignorance comes dullness. So when we talk about dullness, what we're talking about particularly is this idea that our mind gets dark or our mind sort of sinks. And so our mind has this quality of darkness. And so we can think about it as
Onye ma khu ngel se ma na tup tup cha yung do chik sablon chi ta ma thum ni ku pan zo do ti samlo tel mu pa la.
And so also sometimes when we can't sleep, our mind becomes very dark and we can't think very well and we become very dull, we have a very dull mind. So that's one way we can think about what is described here as dullness.
Ta lekan ro kan ri che lekan ro ta kar chawa kan ri che da semba tin cha so na lekat so non ri sho wa ta che mo to yung ra ti cha ni de nyo mong cha to ja ko sa su mo bi cha ro.
And so the reason this is considered an affliction is that really whatever we're doing, not just in terms of Buddhism, but whatever kind of work we're doing, if we have this kind of dull mind, we're not going to be able to effectively do that work, right? It's going to cause problems for us doing that work. So this is understood as dullness, a dull mind.
Ani nyomo chen ye nya ze ya chi shin du nyomo chen ge nya shin na ta nga chung ma lur she yondi tsa wi nyomo ba ta nye wi nyo tsa nyo chi ta nye nyo nye shin na le nya ze ya chi yo ma ra nya ze ya ta jang gir je ze ni de sa lokha chi she wi tin na le ja yo re kam de le nyomo chen ye nya ze re kam de le nyomo ba re ma to nye wi nyomo ba ja go na ma go na ha ma go kan ta nye nyo nye she ze ya tin na le yo ma re.
Yeah. So this idea of afflictive sleep, of course is not in and of itself included among the primary or secondary afflictions, and afflictive sleep itself is not really included among the primary secondary afflictions.
Yana yang aso na chu na le china nya zia ta ke du chama ke wan sam sam lo ge warin ro rin sam sam du pa rin ro rin sam sam ge du pa me parman ri chilin ro ten ro tang de ka ri nga so ni ku bi ka nge le nyomo ban do cha ta kon ro ta je dans la so pa de chila no sem ro ten ri ka long sam lo ten ri chi ta ni ni ka zo na ni cha de chu ni ka na te chama nyomo ba ga chol pan ro a chi asa gesem rawo chi jem pen rawo ta ni jen rawo go me nyen na chi de chu ni chi de ge chi de nga ka se ka na ge wi chol chi a che kan sa lo ma ta ni na la ma ni ro ni so na ge wa se so za kam de la sam lo dik cha ka ni ku a ta le nyomo che ge ni ze.
So when we talk about sleep, there's many activities that are not in and of themselves good or bad or neutral. It's really dependent on the kind of motivation you have. And so if, for example, you go to sleep through motivated by ignorance, anger, attachment, craving, any of these afflictions, then that practice, that sleep becomes afflictive, becomes negative. If you do something then through a good motivation, one of these things that is not in and of itself good or bad, if you do these through a good motivation, then that becomes virtuous. And so this is here how we're talking about afflictive sleep. It's through a bad motivation, essentially.
송산다 가서 나브적 진데 라레 따르토나 페야 포레 니위 카스 셈로로 제니 샴판라오 참센라오 탄텐지가 사블로 레치니 롤로 제니 조타 초칭니 게와 요레라 초칭니 셈캅로로 창조 다니카라카 콘존라오 탄칭도 창조 탄차동라오 텐지 짱짱치티 말람츠간라오 탄 센들이야 종시우라카레타 추초니시나 세치말 득바요레 사블로 잠발리타나 세치말 게와 요레 Chonika Kelena, Tonico Choreta, Chochi send the Mato Kemalina, Sechamanchi Kemalina, Sendela, Sendela Samloya Pochitana, Nikiboku at the Kesare.
So, from the Buddhist perspective, if you can go to sleep, you have a very relaxed mind, and you are thinking about kindness, love, compassion, bodhicitta. If you're going to sleep, falling to sleep with a good motivation, of course, not only is that virtuous, but it will have the effect of also allowing you to sleep much better. You'll have a very relaxed mind and you'll go to sleep, and that will become a virtuous activity. If you go to sleep angry or jealous, your mind becomes very agitated, you're going to have bad dreams, and of course you're not going to sleep very well.
Tamadete kasi tsechima kemalina. Ngatsota tsechima yona mena samdege yona yangzi. Sendela yang samlo kipotani nina ni kipoyon kevsan yoris samlo dicha chonres.
So in this case, I was trying to get clear what he was saying. In this case, it doesn't matter really if we're thinking about past and future lives here. Really, this is a type of benefit that you can have in this life immediately, right now. If you think this way, if you go to sleep with a good motivation, you have an immediate benefit. If you go to sleep angry or jealous or whatever, you're not going to sleep very well with that motivation.
Tindita matseno la lens hetiata soso batson rawchin o tanga ni kuta rendi ni samlo ya potani ni go samni tandi komshik tena ni katina tandi chakare mato anda wachi ni ni jima samlo mato na the Jonya
so if we do this, if we practice this, regardless of if we believe in past or future lives, if we go to sleep and we're like, oh, it's time to go to sleep, I'm going to sort of calm my mind and have a good motivation, this will have a good benefit for us, even just immediately in this life without worrying about it.
Ani tanda marg pati ge cheme pati yang kegre zengdu ta cheme pati ngoni nan do chaka kege yo gonin re chi rendo ata ta ha komo ko kanta lopo yin ge cheme pati yang kegre ore ze ore ta cheme pati ngotsa me pa ze ata tsawi ni samlo chik bare soso go kyonda soso leka dikcha chi chewal leka dikcha chi chewala mi jangan thonsal mache yan la mentonsal leka dikcha che de ata le ngotsa me pa la Tona mantona manzemni che deni tel cheme palawore pena kama jav deni ta chapa jav deni ta ore ta chele she jav tog doate.
So we come to this word non-embarrassment, and there's also shame, and so it's a little difficult here, shamelessness and a non-embarrassment. In Tibetan, there's a distinction about this idea that if you do something wrong and you're sort of embarrassed because other people will see you doing something wrong versus doing something wrong and being embarrassed isn't even the right word. It's like having shame for having done something wrong because of other people or just because of regardless of whether other people or not see it. And so in Tibetan, there's two very clear words. In English, we don't really make this distinction, but the basic idea here is that you have this idea of having done something wrong, having a fault, and having some sense of, even the word shame in English, I think, is kind of loaded, but it's having this virtuous shame about having done something wrong. And so the example he gave is that the idea, if you sort of steal something, you're doing it secretly. And so this would be, I believe, non-embarrassment the way it's, that's what they're calling, I think, shamelessness here. Versus where if you do something wrong publicly that people see, like if you're lying in public, if people find out and you get caught, that would be non-embarrassment. The distinction in English isn't clear and doesn't matter so much. Geshe we also mentioned that maybe he's not sure if this idea of non-embarrassment would come from ignorance. He thinks maybe it would come from a craving or attachment or that, but it's important. This is how Vasubandhu presents this.
Tanda ngotsame pat kendreshe chija inji nol kenza chu ngema tingol yanga sonza da chi kala chwa chele mombo chi chong koso china ngotsa shipa ta te tsa kyon ra wo chi sian ra wo tani chi yo sa ro ta kam di ngotsame pa ze dia ta counter so mi mon ton sal le ka Jomombo, Kumajawa, Chabajazi, Kumajawa, Lasso, Pajala, no Pajala, Montonsal. Ngotsa mepat. Sonza ngotsa shipat nintonari mantonari kyomachini so lisem tapo japshin ketel ngotsa shipi kanza se ore ngazo china te yapo se. Ina ya no shok pitin jo tanye chi yosare te ngotsa shipat te ez kensan da chi yo aju ngema chwa tandi chi chong so ngazo nda. Ngotsa waze te at te ez kyonja hochi. Te sigi yore. Te chwa chi le so ina kamdil sigman jawa yin saro. What's a mepati? You'll manzini me mountain cylinder mandache de atroa. Tang what's a shipazena? Mintonari, Montonari, so lisem dapo jamni yapoch in idea.
Okay. Okay. So there's also another distinction we were making here in Tibetan, the idea of the distinction between conscientiousness and shame, essentially. So the idea of conscientiousness is being aware of your faults and trying to do good, versus the idea of shame is like you've done something wrong and you know you've done something wrong, and so you feel sort of regretful, essentially, for that. So there's the ngotsa shepa thing, ngotsa mepa. So shamelessness actually would be the fault. Shame would be what we're supposed to feel. Shamelessness would be the fault, the lack of regret, essentially, when you've done something wrong. Versus conscientiousness, which is sort of the opposite.
Ani tanjikandu tani tetsobli magevin yopa tetsobda ngaso savinyo momba naliyo savinyo momba samba tetsobli magevin yopa ta magevin yopa te kereze du tan yopa de yanga so nyenyo nyeshanali yo mare jangirje gnali ri tele magevin yopa ze acho magevin yopa ze at yopa ze tinga so hakori lekachini ate akate chemani sambi samlo trawa tate yopa te lagewa tamagewa loma tinkandi che gorezi te penange sonde chiche bande chikse so ta so chiche ni tijel akangi te semani pen non trishor son samna gewa chanro ta yo nga chi sohlen ro chiche so te le ni jisat a tenjuk ma songe sole che mani te ma shi sole zena mi se tro che wo lo ya sole ko son sole ngaro che tsani tijil sole che mani te se chi go samna magewa chanro Mageva Jona, Gewa Jona, Mageva is. Tini, Parmata Sola, Atring and Chamchamandro and Yashasan in your patin at the Sola Lomatina or come the Lanyomochang, Magevin your patria.
So here we're looking at the line from doubt comes non-virtuous regret. And it's important to understand that regret in and of itself can be virtuous, non-virtuous, or essentially neither. It can be neither virtuous, non-virtuous. And what makes regret itself virtuous or non-virtuous is based on the act that we regret. So, for example, if we killed a living being and then afterwards generated a strong regret for having killed that living being, that is virtuous regret. If we like take a life or something, or if we don't kill a living being and then we regret not having done that, that is non-virtuous regret because we're regretting having done something good. So the idea is that regret in and of itself is not virtuous or non-virtuous. It's really, if we regret something good, then it's non-virtuous. If we regret doing something bad, then it's virtuous. And then you can have regret that is essentially, what's the word I'm looking for in English? Neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. And it's like, I didn't go for a walk today. I'm so sad about that, right? That really doesn't matter. It's just neither virtuous nor non-virtuous regret. It's just normal regret.
Otechivshandu Tatani, Kotetsongkiwachima Tojamando, Tachitan the Dramanda Yuri, the Lopo in Sergits and Rotan, controlly Chowatam, Chatotam, Konzentan, Namsil, Zini, Jetamba Jando, and that's so the Chandra Kanjarindo, controls the Atangasokota, Bazati, Tili, Choaki Graze, Choazi, the Atanabji control. Chetak particularly jade or choa the muki yerla nepan penangason rochina chosolo bazanangi chosola shugsam kachati kashasan ko shesat chili yorwa tandichile choala or controzena chili yonari tarimboli yonari samal controz choa zat zu the namjer to dombal teyon kanito yon choa control shik chevi kam jawochi teyon muki nyevala yo patandichile choala ndu.
So the next line here, from anger comes rage, jealousy, resentment, and violence. And so we can make a distinction here between anger and rage, which is kongcho and chowa in the Tibetan here, is the idea that rage is an immediate anger. It's very angry. Somebody's in front of you, your face is red, you're throwing stuff at them. It's an immediate type of anger and very strong anger, whereas anger is a larger general term here in this sense that it's not necessarily somebody right in front of you. It could be the object of your anger could be far away. You could be sitting in your room being angry at something you're not seeing. So that's the distinction that we make between anger and rage in this.
Tani chatore tan chato ta parche khakogre chato zeyati jen le yapon rejichon te on dit tani so semba makini ta pas to de tan chato la de gore.
So you guys probably you probably understand what jealousy is. It's seeing someone else's good qualities or something else good happen to someone else, and then your mind becoming unhappy because you're seeing someone else, having a good quality or being happy.
Tan so nga sol chato zeyana tani ni ba de konzen ro konzen zeyata jamba ji gran le chi manru pa chi chesona ani semle ta ka tina joki gonda jingo talo sano dan lo chi ni semle nya de atel konzen la gore.
What we're translating here as resentment really is this idea that when somebody does something that's not right to you, that something that's bad to you, you hold this grudge, like day and night, you're really holding on to it, like I'm going to get back at them. You're holding on to like a resentment, I think also that's what they translated it as, this sort of constant sort of desire to get back at them because of that.
Tani namse te jambale lutanga tan karu gonaina no pachendo ka samlo taro.
And this violence, it's interesting, these words in English are slightly vague sometimes compared to the Tibetan, but what translated as violence here really is this idea of any kind of mind that is wanting to harm another being.
Tandani kirdani semjong control kewi chowa tan chato ton konzenda namse te son control rewe labjana pache chokching ni relamye jongching du lopo yini te so tawan ro yang kashi tanda oba tome chiri koso ina control te tse kapre yorin ro chi sheng du ta kansa so ngo te yak poshi sona ni nam ha control ni ko.
So there could be some disagreement here exactly in the relationship between anger, rage, jealousy, resentment, and violence. So the Vasubandhu here would probably say that rage, jealousy, resentment, and violence could all be sort of understood as a type of anger, whereas a Sangha might say, that maybe that's not true, that this anger isn't really sort of a container for rage, jealousy, resentment, and violence, that they're actually slightly different emotions. But it really doesn't matter. The important thing here is that if you understand really what they're pointing out, what these negative minds are really, and you understand the essence of them, and then you can sort of avoid them in your mind stream. That's really the important point.
The choan rawachi na kadu jingman jige sem shun chi yongora sonza nabye zopi nyamlen chembon rawachi me na kati samlo tawi ti son ji rakamare ko choa le on di khap le ni de ni kha tin ro jare choa ze ya ching do control nang choa danga so masena le kati le grezina chig nesen rawachi choni ko khap ti ka le on di nabye nyamlen chembo chi me na choa khate cha pe ka le ka boyo.
So it's also in our lives we have lots of situations where the anger can arise very, very quickly, very strongly, and if we don't practice, if we're not careful, it can be very difficult once anger arises to actually have that anger go back down, to decrease that anger once it has arisen.
I have so many kali to my own vitapshi, ni battle and chaton row, kunzen row, no sim row, the song as a lulu chevi cavlet mombole. So now judging the Savlonchini. Chaton Namjagin the Soso Samlo Yapotani. Namjagin is in a titat. Titat. Carry Chato de at the Janga Yonde Soso Maki Pachegor. Carries in a Jala Yonde Yoatu. Jambal Chicomani Soso non jogur. Tate Chena, John Rani to Soso Magic Remato, Jen Sakan Yomar. Te Zonieti on Soso Magic Remato, Jen Sakamar, Corionde Gora, Corionde in the Panjur that so good, Coriona Yore, Tingal Carriore, Tingatsu Pazani. Soso Magic Soso Semba Market Pazo, John and Soso Magic Latia, Tindi Chalas is on the Chaton Longi Cable, Atangi Lemba, Linkan the Cheng, Ngaro Lekangizo, Ngaro Lichon Cheng, do some Tindi Salutan, and the Chotomash, Jambal Yonde Yona, Panjuriona, they are Boris and Nigawa Gonda, and the Chatojal Pengri.
And so really we have to be careful kind of constantly all the time to watch out for these kind of these afflictions, these negative emotions arising. Jealousy, of course, can arise at any time, resentment. These things are some things that we have to really be careful and watch our mind all of the time. And so if we think about jealousy, really, we can examine jealousy. And really, when you're jealous of another person and their good qualities, really, you're only hurting yourself. The other person doesn't care that you're jealous about them. You're not doing anything to them. So you really are just seeing someone else's good qualities and in response to that damaging or hurting yourself. And so it's really, of no use to you at all to do that. So really being careful and guarding your mind against jealousy is very beneficial.
Tenavje konzering konzending ngaso mi mombo konzenchego konzenche te yonjo so mbajingla nogre mato konzenche sa tele chekkan no mari ta kol nona pento ko mari ta no yan to mari tenavje sewa chila no ki gozani samlo chinya dena ta te so kyon na te so le rawa in ba shi pa chini namje so le konzering tratore no sem te so le yon wikable Otanga ngaron kang izogndo sambatishina chuchol salo matanan jitin korang ngoni chena pepen tokore chunro ke male na ya koro penton jogre.
So regardless of whether you consider yourself a Buddhist or you believe in the Buddhist teachings, if you examine these emotions like this, you'll see that just like we talked about with jealousy, resentment, right? Like if somebody hurts you and then you develop resentment, you're not hurting that other person. And even if you could hurt that other person, that wouldn't do you any good either, right? Really, all you're doing is hurting yourself. So just like jealousy, resentment, this sort of mind of violence, the only person that is being hurt is yourself when you generate these emotions. So really, regardless of whether you're a Buddhist or not, however we think about this, if you examine the way that we act with these emotions, you can see that, by developing the jealousy and resentment, we're really only hurting ourselves. We're not really affecting the other people at all in any positive way.
Tanda lama chopa na le tsik chi yore nge tsik ten jogo mandu mato nga so mi te so kari ngal chi go zen matse ni kali jamni so lo no kyang chi dingar kyang zoni ndona mang de ke zo to maris sanje cho den di jamba le gore ze jamba le ka san che deni ke san ma de koro gra re zen ti tsik chi yore.
So there's a verse from the Lama Chupa that's it's a very common prayer in the Tibetan tradition that we'll just paraphrase, that says that most of us normally we're thinking about ourselves all the time. We're trying to create benefit for ourselves, and we're being very selfish, but we're actually just hurting ourselves. And so what the Buddha has said really is that if you focus on others and you try to help others and you work for others' benefit, you actually benefit yourself.
Tenaj konsan chokya ka dia sangdo chanchup ko semziat samje jendo res Sambatın chanchup kesem gujamba chet chego samni korol haksam nanda kate samdi kores dekit korol tundro duze so sem gom now.
So the Dalai Lama often talks about meditating on bodhicitta, or this mind of great compassion, that really, even though we're thinking about benefiting other people, at the same time we actually get the benefit ourselves as well.
Oteni dawchire sonzan de so ron mare chika mare nga so mse nal so lale che chi sonzani choso yang teni cheroche.
Yeah, so if you can really think about this and examine this in this life, and practice this, you will definitely see some benefit.
Ani tawa kungtsa tsanyo la tawa ze chi mang mare ta tsanyo nga che na tawa nga yo sonza tawan chongzeng gen tsukpa ke gre ze tsukpa ze de mi je le kherso tan mambeb che atenji ka cha shendo ke karlon de le tsukpaze ore kansak tsukpa taancho tate pedikara tate ngatso mambo chili yongo ore tate soso ndi tawan chonze lezi soso tawa te yang ta pa shu chi yesam soso tawa chi yona te ya po shu chi yesam ti wangi te ni jale kyason rawo ta mambem rawo te ndi shendo ke karlon chi le tsukpa la gore ze tawan chonze.
Okay. And so here we're on the next line here, which is from holding views to be supreme comes spite. And so from this idea of holding views come to be supreme, you develop this mind that so from holding this idea that views are the supreme, and here we're talking about really our own views are the supreme, we're going to look down on other people. We're going to want to sort of insult and humiliate and see ourselves as better than other people.
Mambipche den Mambipche Kechat Sigdal Shulang that in Yomon by Siguri, Yomon Barriera, Pashot the Makipazo, Pashot Sachilata, Soso Makipazo, Tenitama Makipazo.
So if we're not careful, this is very easy to do. It's very easy for us to sort of have this mind arise and to speak things in ways that are hurt other people. They're meant to put other people down. And of course, when you do this, you make them unhappy. They're going to make you unhappy, and so everybody becomes unhappy. And so it's totally pointless, actually.
So the Kedani Chigerl Pache Yaboyo is setting us a meal Kechashi on these Abzapcheni Shia, the Keso to Somachia, as a point Rawachina Lomba Karikuchon Dora, Kechashi and Zemtokyon Markari in a Shia and a Shejakar. In the potting job. Paul Yamaina, Shran Zemtoche Mari, Kechashi, Chigatatol. It's not Kashimato. Money, pay the test charger.
So in general, foreigners seem to be more careful about this and are good about trying to are good about being careful about how they speak and not being quite so rude about that. But earlier, before in Tibet, people were very direct and very sort of spoke very directly and perhaps did this a lot more where they put other people down or insulted other people.
That no more Lochtaziat or your tigers into that, Kiachi in Girama, Lochtang Mangasosare, or you was it at Soso with Yundets, or Yoni, Caviachi ora. Nima Catare on Chapaziat and Chapaziat, the Queen in Japan, which you are. You say at the cap chaser in Chapaziat, there's a cap chonda or is a Roma to Chetan, or you say that in also, or you gazing door. Use at Jambal Soso Yonde Mena Yondo, Don Jenny, Juman King, Lamboche Mena, Lamboche Triungora, Tetavich. Or you say this also you at the Sopa Caviat, come to Casablotandish. Chapata in capture on them, that's how you are.
And so the next sentence there, from wrong views comes guile. And so here in this idea that guile is going to be very similar to what we translated as concealment. It's this idea that guile is sort of hiding one's motivations or hiding one's faults. And so in a way, it's very similar to what we translated as selfishness. And there's also, we can talk about guile. There's also another, there's yu in the gyu, which is actively sort of misrepresenting things. So these ideas in Tibetan are slightly differentiated, but the idea is from wrong views comes this desire to sort of hide faults or hide motivations.
So poke Tanyanal and object Kinsonal Tanyan the shoe. Me you get sapochi raise in a shoe lag. Me you get sapositi, so yonde mena yondondo, the yona mendondo genita, go de ponchep de nature, or mitil and me you get sabolag.
So there's a word in Tibetan we can say that it's often used in spoken Tibetan that you could say a person that is the dishonest is probably like tricky, dishonest, cunning. It's the idea is it's someone who habitually is hiding their faults, hiding their motivations, and sort of misrepresenting truth, lying, sort of dishonest, sort of cunning with this idea of trying to trick people.
Last tangani ngaso di lopseng nang ge desen chingjoyong gundu ngaso ka se sheorezeti dinal nyomochi vi getal ka se orezeti getal trikshia ta samshia te shesare ani nyomochi vi jamba ta kar rezeti ta ganlma pade dawa ta gombol jondaw ta koso wishia nyomochi vi jamba ta parchi ngipan rawo chi resha tane lopo yin ngishian tanda ngaso shedea ta sundi katigl sanyo ta nyenyo tsama chi chingdo. So
just to summarize here, we're finishing this section about the rising of the secondary afflictions. And so what we looked at here in this section was we looked at Asanga and Vasubandhu's the way of describing the way that the afflictions arose from ignorance based on these lists of two. There's a list of 3 and 6 and 3, and then we also looked at how the primary afflictions arise from ignorance, and then how the secondary afflictions arise from the primary afflictions. And so we can understand this last bit that we were looking at from Vasubandhu. It's an example of how they could arise, but it's not necessarily a definitive, like it has to arise this way. This is really just one way to understand how these secondary afflictions can arise from the primary afflictions.
Natson de Joso Manchesa China Katina Yon de Indu Sonsa, yo so yang shik jabro chi da so so shia ma ze so so nyamling go le pa ya chi ma jamba le she to ya tin chi lo bjong che le rewa che yo tan di kable ke che shor ta nga so kyong ge chon ni che na sa wi nyo mom ba chu nye nyo nye she jangir je te ante le ma ke shol le nyo mong go shol le ro yo son sa te so te ngon ze ya po chi ta te so so ge la le wi on do tan den de sem jong de ngi ge la le son de nga no grin de ngi ge la le son de nga no gre sam ni te so za za che go sam ni me che na le te la le taria te rewa che mo
So my hope really is that you can really look at this and study these and really try to understand really well how these different afflictions, how the afflictions arise from ignorance, how the primary and secondary afflictions arise. And if you can study them and understand them and then even maybe help other people understand them, that would be really wonderful. And also really the important thing with studying these primary and secondary afflictions is really being aware of your own mind and really practicing this idea of watching your own mind and being aware when one of these afflictions arise that you go, oh, okay, this arose, I have to be careful about this. So really making this a practice to understand the nature of these afflictions and watch your mind for when they arise.
Ta ke cheze nga so mse na ka ngi che ma che zan de so de ngon zin ji ni de so le ka te chi cha to na ba chen jing ro gre ni de cha de zan yu zhing ni ni she dik short to so.
So really this is where the cause of all of our problems really if you look at these primary and secondary afflictions, it's 6 primary afflictions and 20 secondary afflictions in this list here. And so if you really examine these and understand, this is where the main cause of all of our problems, this is where all of our problems arise. So if you can understand that, it's really helpful.
Oh, tani chigre tani dese tombo de chandro to da dese nipat semjong ru ka shin na pan sang gardan ro tong kan re zeni te shia tre tan de nyamlen che ka se che go yang ngoni ro te tan dal tan enjoy.
So now we're going to move on to this next section here, which was translated as how some mental factors are mutually incompatible. And so this section really we get into the sort of practice, like how can we practice with these afflictions?
Ta kan li ya kan ge yu shoni che na ge ap chak chik zian ro tan ri she yo re ta ta ge ap chak chik kan na le par che ge wa chama yo na me na ma shi ta yo ge ap chak chik she yo ra sem jong ap ching a chik na ge ap chak chik she yo re ta nyomong go shani che na sa nyu chik ta nye nyu nye she yo re ta ta so pa de che ni ndingdel khate chakre ndingdel khase chakre tindi shego rekamdal tandin kawlma chama ta shemando da kashi gyarlu tani nga so teja ja chinin jonan ring jore.
So earlier we talked about the 11 virtuous mental factors, and then we just finished talking about the 6 root negative afflictions and the 20 nishu.
Geap chachik.
Yeah, so we have the 11 virtuous mental factors, the 6 root afflictions, and the 20 secondary afflictions. And so here what we're going to look at really is how the 11 virtuous mental factors and the afflictions, how we can work with them together and reduce the afflictions through the use of the 11 virtuous mental factors. And we won't go through the relationships between them totally in detail through all of them, but we'll go through some of them to understand how this works.
Nyomong ge che te ta te shem go che kir nam bi jon li lo nam pan sang garda ngir char chapa la zeti ta chandi kanji sem jon chi ka sem jon ka te la no gre zina pe na nga so no sem ze dia khate tel samlo kar ta na ya po cha kare zeti no sem go khate ni je gom go res ni je to ko no sem ze ya to pa shol dik po chi chendo ka samlo re pa shol ni je sha cha wi samlo te le on di pa shol dik po chendo ka samlo te mea chang ro ra son ta ka di na ni je gom de ni ji na no sem de shi chong rin ro re zeng do.
And so for example we can look at when we talk about how these positive and negative mental factors can be mutually incompatible, we can take the example of the sort of mind that wants to harm another living being. And so what is the contrary mental factor of the mind that wants to harm living beings? We can say that compassion is the mind. So that if you have this mind that wants to harm living beings, if you generate compassion, they're not compatible. So as you generate compassion, this mind of harm will become less. So you can see that compassion, this mind that wants to harm living beings, sort of cannot exist at the same time. They oppose each other.
pena nga so ngomba de china rigang le ngomba jamro te jata karan thona ko se go sa ni sen in jare ko lo no sem de legre ko te so le ninje chum ina ko so na le jimin jawo ta kin jawo so ya te so ko ti na ya se go mare ko te le ninje yora son za se go mando son za sem che kan da kan le ninje gom lemna ko te lo no ba che mare.
So for example, you have a person who's a hunter and he goes up into the mountains and kills the animals to get food. And he's able to kill those animals, but when he goes home, he has his dogs and his the sort of animals around the house and his family, and of course he doesn't kill them because he loves them, right? So you can see how this idea that as you love something, the desire to harm them becomes less or goes away.
아니 니 바 컨트롤 원님 보조파 검고레 젠도 타다 나기 용자라 단데 케양 시샤창 쳔모레 나조 컨트롤 원님 타파 셈바 마케 밥조 카투 셈충게들 겐니노 쳔나 도착디가 요레스 칼리 쳔나 도착다 컨트롤 니가 나솔 깡에조 칼리조 아탄 도착디가 레스 카투 control the picture race so that thing zoba gongore zegore
and so we also it's very very frequent that we talk about the antidote to anger being patience. And so patience is understood as the antidote to anger. And so we also can look at the way that the different afflictions affect us or hurt us. And so craving or attachment sort of hurts us sort of slowly, constantly. But anger, when it arises very quickly and hurts us very immediately. And the antidote to anger we can understand is this practice of patience.
Ta zopa gomzea de carrezite sut jambachi que soso no pa kiwata no pa machena no pa cheson samba yoran samsa non trishon tangusa no pa cheona kaptitil o tangi sem chuchu ayo mare sambater a control one the draw yo mares control one the na carre soso no gres tam kashi gezegre mi jamba soso no pa chena pachi lenda chi machena a chonra kando azeni tni mombondo yena ya te lente gona Jambachi Savlo Tani Litre, the Simba Lulucini, Kishashina Andricta. The Marina Troson Andrina, Trojana, Kayomari. That Jamba the Carita Carinari. So same tonight, check compassion and no Mari, so John. Sonza, no bachi caps the same material Lulucini did. Penachinson only a shame.
So what is this idea of practicing patience? How do we practice patience? So the basic idea of patience is this idea that when someone does something you don't like or someone harms you, you don't return with anger. You don't generate this mind that wants to harm them back. You try to keep a mind that is stable and calm, right, in return. And so you can think about this, like one way to understand this is that if someone harms you, if you sort of get angry in response, you really are just hurting yourself. You're just multiplying you're increasing your own harm to yourself. So really, the idea of the practice of patience is this idea: when someone harms you, you can just stay there and keep a calm mind that does not want to return this idea of harm to that other person.
Tanda kinso to so non chomba chimbon rawo ta pombo chimbon rawo ta tanji kinso non lekandra mandra chedeni to so kedan tani shegndo ko so korja chimbon rawo passion chiglab dena ko so lolo de du zengdo lolo de dona e tonda ko so ngaso control zanyeli che chigdom nin ro ja kando sonza tonda kar chimbo ina semba lolo chini che top sona ni kesan che ati yosari control on that tu samlo tan chu ani tijilan chumge mambo chi chen da manda che kyong sama so raya what they insari.
So in society, of course, there's constantly going to be reasons or people that are going to do things you're not going to like or things that are going to hurt you, and so there's constantly opportunities to get angry. But really, what good does it do? Really, if you can practice patience and keep a calm and stable mind, even though other people are doing things that might make you angry, you are the one that benefits from that, of course, from that practice of patience. And then if you don't do this and you get angry, you just multiply your problems. You might break the law, you might do these negative things, and you just create more and more problems for yourself and others.
Ani nanchu ngoni shena kyonjik ta chog na liore control ta dikpa me zopa ta katam ne ze andra wota gendang chumjong gewa ka kya sopa ka chi kinjok ti chi mozoli je dikpa yo ma ze andra wo tanda padida go ma ta chog na ta control ni mu chi she yondi nga so dikpa zoala control na jing dikpa chimbo chi tsawa ni yo ma res control ka ching ma chi ke chi sam pe Ninga gesa mambo chi me pa zo ata chamal ma dikpa mambo nya mambo ngandro dingal mambo chi nyondro shu chi chegre zini control te na chu na ni china dikpa chi ni china diksho chi chi dikpa me zo pa ta kata me kyonji na le yora control na jing dikpa chembo yo mare zo ba go ata nyam le yak po yo mare ze chi chi.
So there's a very famous verse. It's that there's no negative, there's no like affliction like anger, and there's no antidote like patience. It's more pithy in Tibetan, but the basic idea really is that this, that one moment of anger you can create incredible negative harm, and really in the practice of patience is this really important way to counteract that, to keep yourself from generating these really harmful emotions.
어떤 일을 지래 단디 나주 가빈 서서 나주 같은 시요. 단 차도
저기 대링가 저기 지양가디 나빠당 제가
저틀린다 제zembe. 저틀리 요제래. 단단데 뜻이니 되니 차도. 단 차도 제나 가르 다지니 시사리. 차도 거 님보 가르 가와 곰고레스. 다데 아장 겨르서 사블로지 당다레문도에 소소 가보지 제사지그 가르 야보체나 티냠도 소소 가용군도. 소소 마가사치리 야보레 온디테닌 차톤다문 자케긴도 소사 장그 연덴단 자와카리 나가와 곰다 소소 티냠다 장그 연덴데 소소 케포조 그레스 가와 곰고레스 차토체나 장그 연덴데 소소 득보 용그레스 아니 소소 득보 뇨나 가는 차토체 쇼세 케보체 고나는 가와 곰쇼세야들이.
So when we talk about the nature of jealousy, really, right? The nature of jealousy is, of course, when you see someone else that has something good happens to someone else, or someone has good qualities, your mind becomes unhappy. So that, really the antidote to this is when you see someone that is happy or something good happens to someone else, you rejoice in their happiness for them, right? Because if you see someone that you get jealous, you see someone else that has the good qualities or something good happens to them and you get upset, really that just harms you. So you want to counteract that by being happy when you see someone else having good things.
Tendri mare tanda nga so tata soso perjen rao puun rao ta tendri yonde chembo cha panjo chembo cha ta kar yona soso ti nyam de kegro kar ziti ko soso pu yin so sa tel gade yora soso punro chi 소소 배는 나다 빠요 말때 연도차 번러워 지그 고 연대 첨보차 반조 첨보차 다 가르 야보 차나 나디냠데 가데 고 가데 오른 차토 케고만도 소소 볼 볼 세와요 가와 콜 가 손사 콜 차토 케고 말 다니 마가사티 테체 온디 테니 셈반다도 레고도 손사 가와 카체 장기 연대 가와 카체 곰도는 차토 용요 말.
So for example, if if you see your own son and your own son is very wealthy, he's very smart, has all these great qualities, of course you don't get jealous of your own child, right? You rejoice for your own child. But if some stranger that has all of these things, you might jealousy might arise, right? When they have like lots of money, lots of wealth, they're doing really well. So you can think about this really, that you should rejoice in other people's fortune and good qualities.
Last what any thing at so tended Chikajana Matonga to not a check at all Jama to Nayon and Rajan Pachindua. Takama Chunin to Churchill and Rayoe.
So we're having a scheduling situation with Zoom right now. So at 5:30 we're going to get sort of cut off here on Zoom. So we're going to go ahead and stop here today. And if anyone has any questions, we would be happy to take questions, both online and in person. Not yet. You're welcome to ask.
I cannot see the connection of doubt. From doubt comes non-virtuous regret.
So the Tetum Karichin Kanjis the Migewe Guba, Tetum Nejungiri.
Magavin Yopa the Tetum Li Chontoya. Lobo Yin and the Yomoki Rambanda, the Navin, or She Debunda was Shiwichi Mandu. Ta ko Mageva and Yopa the Pena Magavin Yopa the Pena Solent Rawich and Yopa Kira Solava. Solo Zena Hakome. Mi so cheto che would the safe chair telecarlash. Left safely.
So
Solova, Sokyo, 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 Sokyo Banda, which is telling Yopa Kia the car resina. 직 레카 직 대som rjikini tani o tande parching indri yosa maro tani rjik samni da tani yoba ke gres ma to ta rinda yapo resha samni tani yina da yoba ke maro yina ya o ta parching in non trisho yosa re samni tesom ro ji ke on di tani yoba ke on tani ro ji yo ke re samba ngi ba ta zawani ninda yosa mar
So yeah, it's definitely not clearly explained in the text, and these are not understood to be like definitive connections, right? So it's important to understand that this is an example, but the example that Geshe gave is this idea that, say you save someone's life and you have doubt, oh, maybe that was not such a great thing to do. You like through this idea of doubt, maybe it was good, maybe it was bad. Then you can, through this doubt, you can then generate regret for having done something that might be good. Whereas if you definitely knew it was good, you wouldn't generate the regret. So this is the idea that sort of...
So you are confused that the thing is virtue, that the action that you do is virtue.
That's what he said, but I'll ask him, yeah. The idea maybe it was, maybe it wasn't virtuous. 대좀 디 공기 대좀 디 속속교기라 야보 유메 디
그래다 소쇼 받은 것은 세진들이 레카 카리나 가서 레카 야보지 제와와 게비 레카지 디지털 아이니테 체스탄든 요 마요 삼나 디지털 요바케 케세그레스 든지치
Yeah, so basically anything, if you do something good and then later you think, oh, maybe that wasn't good, maybe it was bad, so you develop doubt about whether it was good or bad, and then on that develop regret.
There's no strong conviction that the thing is good. No, that's
What he's saying is that afterwards you may decide, you may not know, you're like, oh, maybe it was good, maybe it was bad. You know, you start to doubt it was good. And because you doubt it was good, then you can develop regret. Does that make sense?
뇨모장그 대som도 시온디다 레카야봇 파칭 인던 제안주요 사마레 삼고레 대som대한 든지치 고레 뭔가 자냠바지 용야요
Maybe I shouldn't have done that. Like, oh, was it good? Like initially maybe you think it's good, then at the end you think, oh, maybe it wasn't good. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. So you develop this regret of something that was virtuous.
Pena 나서 레카 가르친 파친든 주요 사마레 삼비 대som지케나 티지스 아카테체 많이 삼빈교 바티케스 바지레도
Yeah, so any kind of action, maybe you do something, any work or something, and you think, oh, maybe I didn't do that very well, or that wasn't a good job, or I didn't do that, and then you develop regret for having done whatever kind of action.
이나양 요바 인식 문식 대som리케 고응이 받아 요지 말이서.
But you don't. This again. This is just an example that this regret doesn't have to come from doubt.
디 로포이닝 손데아트 소 당이파찬데 당이파차제나 하고 니파르탄지 고레제고는 레시기야이 칼리카본 센전라고 시나 야사레 상고.
These are really just examples. It's definitely not a definitive. This always causes that. This is.
Pena ganliashi marupalin chadan le sarle li dingar kerezedia te nipareta te rosa koro yo mar.
For example, contrasting that with the idea that from ignorance comes self-grasping, from self-grasping comes afflictions, and from afflictions comes negative karma. That's a definitive chain of cause and effect. This is not like that. It's not considered a definitive chain, definitive cause and effect. Yeah. It's an example. It's an example of how to think about it.
Last. Tendo chikrenso. Wando watching
If we realize our past wrongdoings and feel regret or guilt about them, what is the antidote, and how can we avoid being attached to these thoughts? So natsati ngumagi tikpa sakpe tikpa tetso gyoba gena the gyoba yore about them. What is the antidote? Tela the nyumba kari yoris. Yang nati ngazo di semlo tang dindrik ngazo kanjis di tela di chakpa getu kimaris. This kongi past running. And are you willing to clarify your question a little, because we're supposed to regret wrongdoings. So our past wrongdoings, we should feel regret about them.
Sure. Yeah, I'm mostly curious if sometimes you can think about it too much, overthink about it. So you've done it in the past and you regret, but you keep thinking about it.
You're like punishing yourself or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's not what we're supposed to do. I'll ask Geshe about it. So let me rephrase your question. How can we avoid like continuously sort of punishing ourselves for our past negative actions? Like, is that sort of your
Yes.
question? Like a
Yes.
healthy regret versus an unhealthy regret.
Yes.
Okay. So the 공기 지원은 이 그래 ngaso tamsam mi kashe di dikba sakna jela mutune gyobegeri nga rangwa di nuba chegeri kangsa nga be mi tukjakyen di nangshin di gyoba shumpo yang na gyoba te peche pinto yomare to yongeres akosone di gyoba yapogeri ngaso di dikba sakbe di sakbe di dikba te numa chegimare ini mi kashe di dikba sakna mutune kola di
강아 속으로.
소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소소sosososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososososo zo to kimares. The gyoba yakpo kind of gegere getu kiris.
Re ta re ngashi non chi shwa la teni tani so so nyomba na ja chandro nyin dundwa.
Yeah, so this happens. This is a problem. Some people do punish
Sonza
themselves.
nabje nga tsu kyo pa ga nyam de shirab ze at ke chembo re ze at ti kabl la le che ko che ton yo pa che ko res ngi te non chigla non chi je aka te ngi che manis samna ta nge matal pe non chig te chu tab yo na nu chu ta mena chimandi tan ji meche ta ka ta to ji ma ya po che ko re sa mong shen so so le du po ta de na sel pen to ko re no ba ma to yong ma re zini nap kyo pe cho ta ni nap kyo ta nyam de yo pa jin ro to na ya po yo sa re ma to ga shi nyom ba na je cha te ni ya ko nyo mo ni
So yeah, so it does happen like this that we really sort of hurt ourselves. The important thing is to really use your wisdom and understand that right, so you did something wrong. You have to say, yes, I did something wrong. You make this commitment not to do it again in the future. If it's something that you can fix or repair or somehow help, that you make effort to fix it. But that's really the end of it. You shouldn't sort of continually sort of punish yourself, because that doesn't help you. It doesn't help anyone. That's really just self-harm at that point. So the important here is to just be smart about how you handle this regret.
non tik the man tik sam di sha ja ti da so na chu nya le chen ken ro yin ta ni te le dik sha ro chi ni kan don che ya ta tin ji da man da che gre ta nga so chen so na le ka ya bo mi jen le pen ya le ka mong bo che re ti ni so so jo se pa se ke nge ma ni pa ta sha bi che ta jam phang le ka le ta ti ni jig ro go re jo pa ka je shi chen bo cha na ngo ma dik pa ta ya ta ge wa sa yong re jen le ta te na cho yo mar
So in Buddhism, of course, we have different sort of practices we can do to purify negative wrongdoings by doing the mantras and things like that. But really, just in general in society, you can think about any kind of positive action that helps others. You can think about that as a method for purifying this negative action, and you sort of can use that as
oh yo
We just got kicked out of this. We have 2 new classes.
ya cho ni pe chang zu la Dari ko kama ni nge le so 2 minutes before again mare again re kami 2分钟见到了
2分钟前
欠枪组了
被踢出来，
怎么说
2分钟前被
疑问
踢出来，
疑问怎么说
哦 kick out，踢出来
before 2 minutes just ago
Yeah, 2 minutes ago we got kicked out.
oh yeah 他这个介绍
Okay.
嗯
Yeah.
创定着手过早哎
Did
Ko po ke jang go ra?
You understand some Tibetan, don't you?
Yes, of course.
Are you not able to understand? No.
I understand.
ah yeah ko ka ni ro me ma
Where are
chi
you
la
from?
o Mexico re Mexico Mexico Puchugare Puchugamare Spanish Rena Pujiri oh yeah tanda 什么 Wemba.
Anger.
Anger.
When we anger